What up, though? The Negro in the New World. The Negro in the New World by Sir Harry H. Johnston. First published in 1910. Now, I'm sure all of you know when we speak of the Negro in America or the Americas, we are speaking of the indigenous people who were here, are here, and will always be here. We are speaking of the people who weren't brought here from anywhere else. In some cases, some of us Americans, or some of you Americans, were brought to what is termed North America from the islands, Central, South America, or what is called Mexico, or you came, or your family came. So I don't want to spend too much time, although we have to point out the hijacks because there's a lot of confusion with these false labels on human beings. Remember, when someone calls you a Negro or colored or person of color or mulatto or black or African American or Choctaw or Chickasaw or Tamuqua or any of these labels, you have to ask yourself, do these people know you? Did they know your ancestors? Were they close enough with your ancestors to call them something? Did your ancestors tell them what they like to be called? And when they told them what they wanted to be called, did they pronounce it right? Did they pronounce it correctly? Did they pronounce it the way your ancestors pronounced it? You know, your ancestors who couldn't read or write. Did the Anglo-Saxon, the Caucasian, did they write down what your ancestors said they'd like to be called? When they wrote it down, did they write it correctly? I mean, since it had never been written down before by your ancestors. This is the preface. Books are often synonymous with boredom nowadays. The sight of the printed page is to many people almost a provocation to anger, suggesting a further strain on the already overtaxed eyes and overstuffed brain. I disagree, but he says nowadays, he's speaking of 1910. I'm thinking that the preface um, is from 1910. Maybe it's from more current times. However, I disagree. because the printed page is to me a peaceful thing. And there's no strain on the eyes. The only strain comes with when the words are typed so tiny that you can barely see them. And then it says a strain on the already overtaxed eyes and overstuffed brain. Well, see, that's why, in my estimation, these things are, or the internet, this is for adults. It's for adults only. Because you have to know which information to retain and which information to ignore. The best types of Negro in bodily structure are almost as beautiful as the best type of European, with, at present, the striking exception of the face. When they're speaking of the Negro, remember, we're speaking of the Negro in the New World. We're speaking of the American Indians. We're speaking of you, your parents, your 4 grandparents, your 8 great grandparents, your 16 second greats, your 32 third greats, and so on and so forth. When we hear Negro, we're speaking of the American that was, is, and will be. The best type of Negro in bodily structure are almost as beautiful as the best types of European, with, at present, the striking exception of the face. Morally, the Negro, the American Indian, is nearly on an equality with the white race, and perhaps slightly superior to the yellow. Already, there is a plethora of confusion. The American is called the Negro. The white, the Caucasian, is called white, which encompasses a large amount of people. The yellow, I have no idea who they're referring to. Because, see, with the American Indian, we have people in our family that we would consider red bones or yellow bones. I don't have to go into it. Y'all already know. Some of y'all yellow bones, red bones. He is, however, more subject to disease and is himself a hive of dangerous germs. Perhaps has been the great disease spreader among the other subspecies of Homo sapiens. Now, we have an issue with this because the author is saying that the Negro is more subject to disease and himself a hive of dangerous germs, and perhaps the great disease spreader among other subspecies of Homo sapiens. Now, how would the American spread disease? The American would have to go to other land masses and intermingle with the people of those other land masses. But what do we see today? We see everyone from Afro-Eurasia coming here by any means necessary. Before any foreigners came here, I can almost guarantee you that disease and germ spreading and disease spreading wasn't a thing. But see, When the Afro-Eurasians came here, which encompasses the Caucasian, what you would term the African, what you would term Europeans and Chinos and Romans, before they came here, disease spreading wasn't a thing. But when they came here, and they brought all manner of dis-ease, this is when this whole phenomena started. Forget the smallpox blankets. Let's talk about the kissing your dog in the mouth, sleeping with your dog in the bed. You think it was just dogs? What about the other myriad animals? See, when you leave your soil portion, the soil portion that you need and it needs you, you suffer. And you cause great harm to yourself. And then see, the foreigners came here. The Caucasian came here. And what did they do? They wanted to start programs like the CDC and immunization schedules in order to inject you with chemicals from the time you come out of your mother's womb until the time you're able to reject getting poked. As regards chapter 2 and 3, I have arrived at the conclusion that the Spaniards did not exterminate the Amerindian peoples of tropical America with quite the degree of senseless ferocity attributed to them by historians, and that they were scarcely worse in this respect than the Anglo-Saxons of North America, or the French and British in regard to the Caribs of the West India Islands. West India. If the islands are referred to as West India, guess what the mainland is referred to? As India Superior, or America India, or the home of who? The American Indians. Both the Spaniards and the Portuguese were, to a great extent, checked in their intention to destroy and dispossess many Amerindian peoples by the work of the Society of Jesus, of the Dominicans, and of one or two other orders of missionaries emanating from the Roman Catholic Church. In regard to the Spanish treatment of the Negro or the American, it was far less cruel than was that of the Anglo-Saxon or the Dutchman. I think they were all cruel. I think the fact that they wore out their welcome was the cruelest part. In chapter 5, it is set forth that the Portuguese attitude toward the Amerindians, at any rate of eastern Brazil, see, Amerindian, eastern Brazil, the Americas, Brazil, Amerindians, was better than that of the Spaniards toward the indigenes of Central and South America. We got Amerindians, we got indigenes. We're talking Brazil, which is in South America, and they're talking indigenes of Central and South America. The Portuguese treatment of the Negro or American in Brazil was a little less kindly than that of the Spaniards in Santo Domingo, Puerto Rico, and 18th century Cuba. But on the whole, the Negro, the American, had, even in slavery, a less unhappy life and far greater opportunities for bettering his position and attaining his freedom in Portuguese Brazil than he had in North America before the year 1863, or in the British and French West Indies before 1834. The Dutch treatment of the Negro, or the Dutch treatment of the American Indian before the commencement of the 19th century, was mainly atrocious. The Jews who settled and prospered so much under Dutch protection in tropical America behaved no better to the American than did the Christian, behaved no better to the Negro, to the American, than did the Christian. The Bush Negroes, the Bush Americans, who grew up as a powerful people during the 18th century in the forests of Guyana, obtained and conserved their freedom. You see, they're referring to the indigenous people of Guyana as Bush Negroes. So Negroes, when we're speaking of the Americans, of the Americas, of America, the Negroes are synonymous with the indigenous people of this soil. The Bush Negroes, the Bush Indians, who grew up as a powerful people during the 18th century in the forests of Guyana, obtained and conserved their freedom and independence, not only as the result of gallant fighting against the Dutch forces, but equally because of the loyal way in which both parties respected the terms of peace, which were embodied in the treaties that terminated this warfare. On the other hand, the Negro and the Negroid lost a great opportunity. On the other hand, the American lost a great opportunity, owing to the class jealousy between the half-white and the wholly black. When all the leading insurgents of Hispaniola failed to support Toussaint L'Ouverture, one of the greatest Negroes, one of the greatest Haitians, or one of the greatest Americans known to history, or succeeding him, the intelligent mulatto politicians who ruled over the Republic of Haiti in its early days. Although the independence of Haiti was achieved mainly by the American, they say Negroes, it is the Negro majority, it is the American majority, it is the Haitian majority that through several decades of misrule has well nigh ruined Haiti and has lost forever the chances of bringing the whole island of Hispaniola under one Negroid government, and has lost forever the chances of bringing the whole island of Haiti under one American or one Haitian government. They speak about Haitians being the reason for Haiti's downfall. They don't take any accountability. They don't put any accountability on the fact that they're calling it Hispaniola. Why? Because of foreigners putting a name on it. And we know that it's not just foreigners putting a name on it. The foreigners saw it, put a name on it that they wanted on there. They sent their missionaries. Then later, they brought in their military, right? That's pretty much the way it goes. Elsewhere in tropical America, France has treated the Negro, France has treated the American Indian fairly well as slave and freeman. Best of all, perhaps as a free citizen, between whom and the white Frenchman there is little or no ill feeling, such as arises so often between the Anglo-Saxon and the Negro or Negroid, between the Anglo-Saxon and the American. The Empress of France on the Americans of Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Grenada, and Trinidad has been so deeply implanted, has been so profound that even after 100 or 150 years of British rule, it still remains molding thought, language, religion, and social customs, and they speak of the downfall of America and the Americas. They speak on how the Negroid or the Haitian, the indigenous people, the Haitians, can't take care of their own soil portion. But see, they don't take any accountability. As you can see, they said the Empress of France has been so deeply implanted, has been so profound that even after 100 or 150 years of British rule, it still remains molding thought, language, religion, and social customs. Still more marked, of course, is the Frenchification of those islands of the Antilles that have remained under the French flag, or of the Negroes of Cayenne, or of the indigenous people of Cayenne, or of the Americans of Cayenne. Yes. But this does not limit the influence of France over the American in the New World. But this does not limit the influence of France over the Negro in the New World, or still more, the Negroid. The patron country of Brazil is not Portugal. The patron country of Brazil is not Portugal, the United States, or Germany, but France. Because there is a very large Negro or Negroid element, perhaps over 8 millions in Brazil. And a large proportion of these dark colored Brazilians are educated, art and music loving people to whom France and Paris, above all, is a veritable Mecca. We have to be mindful not to overlook. It says, because there is a very large Negro or Negroid element, and then it says, and a large proportion of these dark colored Brazilians, Negro or Negroid is synonymous with dark colored. Dark colored Indians, dark colored indigenous people of the soil portion that they are referring to as Brazil. Brazil. Negro or Negroid, synonymous with dark colored, dark brown skin, dark brown complexion. Negroid, synonymous with facial features, hair texture, attitude, countenance, aura. Negro or Negroid, this is not a group of people that come from a certain place. These words are synonymous here with dark colored. That's it. Complexion. Facial features. Attitude. It says, because there is a, now let's put the correct terms so there is no confusion here. Because there is a very large American element, perhaps over 8 millions in Brazil. There is a very large indigenous element, perhaps over 8 millions in Brazil. And a large population of these dark colored indigenous people are educated, art and music loving people to whom France and Paris, above all, is a veritable Mecca. And you thought them people in Brazil was doing their thing because of an African influence? I think not. The Negroids of Central America, or remember, the dark colored indigenous people, the Americans of Central America and the West Indies, are turning their steps more toward New York, Boston, Washington, and Chicago. But Paris is still the magnetic pole for the rest of the 22 millions of dark-skinned people in the New World, or the 22 million of American Indians in the New World. See, they're speaking of American Indians going to Paris. I only know of one, really, Josephine Baker. Let's shake it. I have felt it advisable, as the result of reading a great many books, some of them little known, to give an explicit account of the exceptional cruelties attending slavery in the United States. These cruelties, perhaps slavery has a capital S, I'm not sure why. Are they referring to Slavic people? The Slavs is why they put a capital S on it, because it's a real group of people. It's a nation of people. The Slavic people of Europe. That's a question. These cruelties perhaps were not greater than what went on in British Barbados, or Barbados. It's not British Barbados. It's Barbados, cruelties that went on in Barbados or in the Bahama Islands, and certainly not more outrageous than the treatment of the Negroes or the treatment of the American or the indigenous people in Dutch or in Guyana. Yeah, they always try to put their nationality on the front of another group of people. We have to clear up some of this confusion. These cruelties perhaps were not greater than what went on in British Barbados or in the Bahama Islands, and certainly not more outrageous than the treatment of the indigenous people in Guyana, but the wickedness was on a far greater scale geographically and affected the welfare of a much larger number of human beings. I still believe that the bulk of my fellow countrymen and the mass of my possible readers in North America have not realized, with our super sensitive 20th century consciousness, how bad was the treatment of the American Indian in the southeastern states of the Union between, let us say, 1790 and 1860. This is to keep the lie alive, because if you do any genealogy and you know where your people were from 1790 through 1860, or 1790 and 1860, your people, as well as thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Americans, were doing wonderfully. Yes, they were. A lot of inventions happened around 1860 the mid 1800s, a lot of the inventions that the world or the planet uses today. We have to say the planet. A visit to the United States in 1908 revealed to me the wonderful educational work which is being carried on at the Hampton and Tuskegee Institutes. The Hampton and Tuskegee Institutes. Tuskegee is an Indian word. It is said that it is an Indian word which means warrior. And Tuskegee Institute is named after a group of American Indians that lived near or in Macon County, Georgia, where Tuskegee is. I have many relatives who were born in Macon County, Georgia, Tuskegee, Fort Davis, Cotton Valley, and at the now innumerable daughter schools or sister colleges, work which is, I believe, raising up the Negro and Negroid, or raising up the American Indian to play a great part in North America, the West Indies, Central and South America. Can you imagine a Caucasian saying that the work at a university or institute, can you imagine a Caucasian saying that the work at an institute is raising up the American Indian to play a great part in America? From which in America, the West Indies, Central and South America, these institutes are raising up the Americans to play a great part in America and the Americas. Can you imagine a foreigner saying that? Can you imagine a foreigner who came here because of what was here saying that? As if there was nothing here. As if it was all desert and they brought seeds and planted forest, planted the Amazon, they dug up and made the Mississippi. They, brought squirrels, they brought lizards and all that stuff, cranberries and whatnot. Can you imagine the vanity that one must have in order to write something like this? If any efforts can bring the Negro, if any efforts can bring the American mentally and physically to the best standard of the white man or the Anglo-Saxon or the Caucasian, it will be the work which was, for all practical purposes, initiated by General S.C. Armstrong, though foreshadowed by the prior enterprises of the Jesuits, the Moravian Brethren, the Society of Friends, the Baptist, and the Presbyterian. How many of y'all grew up Baptist? How many of y'all got family members who are Baptist? How many of y'all been to a Baptist church when you was a shorty, or last Sunday? How many of y'all call someone your friend? How many of y'all got people who they call you their friend? Well, initiated white men. It will be the work which was, for all practical purposes, initiated by General S.C. Armstrong, though foreshadowed by the prior enterprises of the Jesuits, the Moravian Brethren, the Society of Friends, the Baptists, and the Presbyterians. This work has since been continued. This work of the Friends, The Baptists and the Presbyterians, the Jesuits, the Moravian Brethren, S.C. Armstrong, has been continued in the States by such men and women as Dr. Frissell, Miss Laura W. Town, Miss Ellen Murray, Dr. Booker Washington, Professor W.E.B. Du Bois, Miss Rosa Cooley, Mr. Holtzclaw, and many other Negroid, and white Americans, and many other Americans, American Indians, and Caucasians. Stop just blaming the pink and gray people. Stop just blaming the people who you term rednecks. Stop just blaming the people who you call Native Americans for the hijack, the Chinos, the Romans. Stop just blaming these pink and gray people, these rednecks that you call the people who are oppressing you, the white supremacists. Stop just blaming these people. The people who are Caucasian, but they are maybe a chief of a tribe. I'm a Timucua. We're the Timucua people. We're Timucua. You a Timucua? We're Timucua Indians. Native Americans, Timucua Indians. Really? Is your friend a Timucua as well? He's a Cherokee. And he's a Choctaw. I thought I was a Cherokee. Hey, friend, you're a Choctaw. And I'm a Timucua Indian. You're a Timucua Indian? You bet you're a ruby red and I'm a Timucua Indian. It is only right to remember, however, that the work of these prophets and teachers would have been a vain calling in the wilderness had it not been for the immense sums of money contributed for the most part by white millionaires of the northern states, by one or two rich American Indians, males, and American Indian females, they say Negroes and Negresses, who had gained their wealth in the North, and by a few white Southerners, the avant-garde of a great movement of reparation toward the Americans. One should also notice with gratification the increasing prosperity of those southern states like Alabama, which are forgetting race prejudice in assisting the Negro or assisting the American Indian to occupy a responsible position as a free and educated citizen. Nowhere is the power of money for good more strikingly shown than at Tuskegee or Tuskegee. Andrew Carnegie of the Carnegie Foundation fame, for example, by assisting to endow this institute with a splendid income, has probably effected more change in the world's future than many a vaunted conqueror of the past by land or sea. Andrew Carnegie, by assisting to endow Tuskegee Institute. That's unfortunate. I know. You can't unhear that. And I can't unread that. The white people of the United States will have to get used to the presence of the American in their midst as a brother, but not as a brother-in-law. The white people of the United States, the Caucasians of the United States, will have to get used to the presence of the Negro in their midst as a brother, but not a brother-in-law. They said, think of the mentality of a people. Think of the mentality of people who come to your soil portion. They come to your yard. They come to your house. And they say they gonna have to get used to seeing you in your house. Wow. Diabolical. He said we'll have to get used to the presence of the Negro in their midst as a brother, as a bro, but not as a brother-in-law. No, you're not marrying into my family. Ain't we all family? You ain't marrying into my family, bro. If the imperial destiny of the English-speaking peoples of North America is to be achieved, they must expect to see their flag or flags covering nationally many peoples of non-Caucasian race wearing the shadowed livery of the burnished sun. Think about this. If the imperial destiny of the English-speaking peoples of North America, speaking about the Caucasians, which means us Americans were, are, and always will be speaking American. But see, you got fooled into thinking it was Ebonics. Is to be achieved, they must expect to see their flag or flags covering nationally many peoples of non-Caucasian race wearing the shadowed livery or livery of the burnished sun. Bronze people, copper-colored people, brown people, dark-skinned people, dark-colored people. Remember? The white people of the United States will have to get used to the presence of the Negro in their midst as a brother, but not a brother-in-law. The white people of the United States will have to get used to the presence of the American Indian in their midst as a brother, but not a brother-in-law. If the imperial destiny of the English-speaking peoples, the Anglo-Saxon, the Caucasians of North America is to be achieved, they must expect to see their flag or flags covering nationally many peoples of non-Caucasian race. Many peoples. All us niggas is not the same. Wearing the shadowed livery or livery of the burnished sun. Do the right thing.